World War II began in September 1939 with Germany's invasion of Poland and became the deadliest conflict in history. By 1944, 1945, the Allies were advancing from the west, while the Soviet Union pressed from the east. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched one of history's largest amphibious invasions, D-Day in Normandy. Thousands of ships and aircraft carried Allied soldiers toward fortified beaches. They faced heavy fire but secured footholds that would open Western Europe. Over the following months, Allied forces pushed through France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Civilians greeted liberators, and the German military found itself stretched thin on multiple fronts. By late 1944, Germany was fighting a desperate war on two fronts, west and east. Logistics failed, morale fell, and Germany's strategic position deteriorated. Allied air and ground superiority kept pressure unrelenting. The liberation carried great cost but set the stage for the final push into Germany. Troops from many nations fought together to overturn Nazi occupation. By early 1945, the Allies were poised to enter the German heartland. D-Day began the liberation of Western Europe and pushed the Axis toward collapse. From the east, the Red Army prepared to drive into German territory, leading to the final battles of Europe. 1945 would see Germany surrounded and the war in Europe brought to an end. In early 1945, the Soviet Red Army crossed into German territory, pushing hard toward Berlin. Streets became battlefields as both sides paid a heavy price. The Red Army closed in on Berlin from multiple directions. At the same time, Western allies crossed the Rhine and pushed into Western Germany. The country was effectively surrounded, with collapse a growing certainty. German commanders scrambled to respond on multiple collapsing fronts. In April 1945, Soviet troops entered Berlin, closing the noose on the Nazi capital. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker rather than surrender. Shortly after, German commanders began negotiating unconditional surrender. On May 7, 1945, Germany formally surrendered in Reims, France. May 8 was declared Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, as people celebrated across the continent. Joy mixed with the sobering sight of ruined cities and immense loss. Europe celebrated victory. But the human cost was vast. Millions dead and millions displaced. Leaders met to shape the post-war order even as the war continued in Asia. While Europe breathed a tentative sigh of relief, the Pacific War still raged, and would decide the war's final chapter. In the Pacific, the fighting remained brutal. The United States seized islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa at terrible cost. These victories brought American forces ever closer to Japan's home islands. Aircraft carriers and amphibious forces prepared for the next, costliest phases of the war. Japan's government refused unconditional surrender, even as its situation grew hopeless. U.S. planners readied for a mainland invasion that was expected to be enormously costly. To avoid that outcome, American leaders chose a different, devastating path. On August 6, 1945, the city of Hiroshima was destroyed by an atomic bomb. The devastation was unprecedented, instant and far-reaching. Survivors faced destruction, injury, and an uncertain future. 3 days later, on August 9, Nagasaki was struck by a second atomic bomb. The combined effect of the two bombs and other pressures changed Japan's calculations. The Soviet Union's sudden declaration of war and invasion of Manchuria compounded Japan's crisis. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a historic radio broadcast. The formal surrender was signed on September 2 aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. World War II was finally over with the formal surrender document signed. The war left tens of millions dead, devastated cities, and a world in shock. From the ruins came new institutions, most notably the United Nations, aimed at preventing another global war. At the same time, the Cold War rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union reshaped global politics. Yet from ruins, recovery and new global orders arose, a reminder of both cost and resilience. This was the end of World War II, a conclusion born of sacrifice, strategy, and tragic choices.